Okay, thank you very much, Arjit, for taking us through all those details. So obviously this would be a definite wealth creator for Vijay Mallya, but then again, FDI norms, that stays on the government whether or not that will be eased going forward to allow FDIs as foreign carriers to come and invest in Indian airlines. Moving on from that, the sector in review today is the outlook sector, and Mark Martin joins us. He's a senior advisor for the aviation sector with KPMG. Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for joining us on NDTV Profit. Obviously, the obvious question, since Kingfisher has been in the limelight this morning, is what's your sense on FDI being eased for foreign carriers to come in and invest into India? What's your feeling on that?
Morning. Thanks for having me on the show today. Well, I think India as a country allows 49% FDI in the aviation sector. The FDI current law, just to go into it very briefly, permits you to invest up to 49% provided you're not an airline directly. So, incidentally, we're the only country in the world that allows investment into the airline business up to 49%. Also, let's not forget, NRI investments is permissible up to 100%. Now, you compare this with the other countries around the world. The US does not permit investment in the airlines from anyone. It could be an investor, it could be the airline, or anybody, provided provided the investment is from a US company. Now, world over, yes, cash flow has been a concern area. I'm not going to deny that. I think what airlines need today is more of working capital as opposed to, offloading stake. And at times, offloading stake is not the right thing to do, because currently you don't want to, stake is something which is valuable. You want to keep that as close to your heart as possible. Private equity as an option, yes, works. But I think strategically, historically, we've seen that airlines around the world, some of the larger ones, have always resorted to code share alliances, which have been more and more productive. And eventually, those are what give you the seats end of the day, So I think whether this is the right thing or the wrong thing to do, I think it's too early for me to say anything. But strategically, from a broader standpoint, I think you have alternatives, and one can look at those.
Right, Mark, but that brings me to the question, why would any prospective investor really look at investing into an airline company in India, given the current scenario and the financial crisis that the sector is going through right now?
Well, we must understand the sector is going through a phase. Now, these phase and dips in the airline business is cyclical. We've seen that happen in history. The US stock, the Wall Street stock market crashed in '84. Then came the Gulf War. Then came 9/11. Then came SARS. Then came avian bird flu. And this time it's been on in fuel prices. Now, interestingly, what's happened is that the global meltdown of the global economic situation has made oil prices less speculative. In fact, oil prices is $56, $57 a barrel today, is based on current valuation, is based on realistic demand and supply figures. So this is a phase. I agree. It's a rough phase. It's a patch we're going through, but it's not likely to last forever. We've already seen the signs of recovery. Currently, our airlines have an average occupancy of 69 to 71%, which is not bad at all. We have fuel prices come down. The Ministry of Petroleum has taken a stance on revising fuel prices every 15 days. So, signs of recovery is there. It's not as bleak as it looks. And let's not forget, I mean, the key to the aviation sector's survivability, and the aviation sector is hit the worst because it's susceptible and prone to each and every economic driver, be it a currency fluctuation or oil or even an economic situation. So it's just a phase we're going through. I think one should not resort to knee-jerk reactions by immediately going into stock sale discussions. I think one needs to be a bit more patient, and most importantly, you got to stay invested, because our airline started after 2005. It's just 3 years. After 3 years, you can't, all hell can't break loose, and you can't go nuts about talking about a stock sale. I think one needs to remain invested and stay focused in the business. ROI in the aviation business between 5 to 7 years. We all know the figures for the other businesses, so I think one needs to be a bit more patient. And the key message is we're just going through a phase, and we will recover from this. So frankly, I want to be positive, and I think everybody should be positive.
Okay, Mark, we'll take that advice. But ATF cuts, we did talk about that. There have been quite a few of those in the three in the month. Do you expect any more ATF cuts this month?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we should see an interesting dip in pricing for fuel. I think sometime by January, February, once India starts to, we have picked up a fresh stockpile of fuel. So by the time we get rid of our existing stocks, that should be sometime in Jan or Feb. And I think Jan, Feb, we should see some interesting ticket pricing happening out there. Again, it would be at the sole discretion of the airline if he wishes to pass that benefit on to the consumer. But it is likely that that benefit will come on to people like you and me, because airlines are competing. The competition is aggressive, And somewhere down the line, airlines have realized that the Indian consumer is price sensitive and he's shrewd as well. So we should see some sort of interesting trend happening. Yes, fuel prices will come down further, and we should see a nice healthy business recovery sometime Jan-Feb.
Right, Mark. Also, if you look at the whole sector as by and large, do you see the aviation sector has been, like you said, it's only been there for 3 years, so obviously it's too soon to say anything about it. But do you think there's anything wrong with their business model? Do we need corrections when it comes to restructuring the way the organization or the aviation sector functions?
Yeah, well, that's one of the biggest issues today. I agree. What's happened is that when our airline started, we aggressively chose to compete on price points. Now, you kept your price point competition based on direct operating costs, which actually resided on fuel, and you tried your best to compete with the rail sector. Now, the minute fuel went up, your price point shot up by at least 20–30%. So you just became non-competitive in the market. Somewhere down the line, I think the biggest mistake we all made as the airline sector, and I really don't blame the airline business. I think a lot of it was based on some hype and enthusiasm. One should not have picked up the railways to be a competition. There's no way in history does one mode of transport compete with another mode of transport. You can never compete a bus with a rail, or you can't compete a ship with probably a train service. Similarly, I see no reason why should an airline or the aviation business compete with rail. Globally, most LCCs, the premise of LCC is to broaden the travel sectors, to make it more and more acceptable, broaden the traveler base. Europe, we don't have airlines like EasyJet competing with Eurorail or maybe the Channel Tunnel service. Not in the US do you have guys like Southwest compete with Amtrak. Coming back to India, maybe somewhere down the line they said, well, because railways is the movement for the masses and therefore we should compete with it. But pretty much somewhere down the line, strategically, that wasn't a thing to do, because you picked on an adversary who had every possible chance and element to take you down whenever he wanted to. So I think somewhere from a reality perspective, our airlines competed on price points. They should have competed on service. Right. They should have competed on whatever value add they had, and maybe that was a mistake. So business model, yes, one needs to realign a business model. I think what we need to do today is cost optimize. Fuel accounts for between 30 to 55% of airline expenditure, but also that leaves the rest 55 or 70% for you to cut back on. And one needs to be smart now. You've got to be more prudent with your money, and you've got to actually figure out where you're spending your money in an airline, and that's exactly where the business model element can come in. Aggressive cost optimization has worked extremely well around the world with most airlines, and I think cost optimization needs to come down to India now, and our airlines need to do that right now.
Right, Mark. Also, if you were to pick airline companies, which ones would you say are better placed than the others right now?
One of the most controversial questions on the program today, but I think most of all, one must understand our airlines are young. Average fleet, most of our inductions on fleet happened after 2005. Almost all our fleet is less than 3 to 4 years. I really wouldn't like to, make a comment by saying that a market cap is the right way to value an airline. It's not. If you look at just the fleet size and what the airline has, it's they're far higher in terms of value. Key message going on, I think from which is good or which is bad, one can't tell. I think the key to being better is how efficiently you operate your airline, is how your business model is, and how you look at your maintenance standards and flight safety standards. And this is what pretty much sums up our airlines. So I think all of them are fairly shoulder and above each other. They wouldn't want to compromise on any element, including flight safety. So I think our travelers are very safe. They're flying probably the youngest fleet in the world. They're flying next generation aircraft, and they're flying with the best pilots and pretty much the best engineers out there. So sector can't get any better. It's just that you need to be a bit more patient with the business, and it will pay you back.
Right. Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mark Martin, for joining us this afternoon on NDTV Profit and sharing your perspective on the aviation sector. So clearly there is hope for the sector, and it's too soon. And our aviation sector, like Mark said, is very young, and the FDI will, if the government had to ease that, is the step in the right direction. But again, it's too early to tell. On that note, let's slip in a quick break. But when we come back, we'll take you through what else is driving our markets.